Hello and welcome to another episode of The Lion's Den. My name's Toby Bennett and today we are going to be talking about the developing meta and how Dark Angels fit into that. So if you follow a lot of Warhammer content on YouTube, you've probably seen quite a few channels doing tier lists for where they think factions might end up. And I think for the most part it looks like Dark Angels are considered one of those middling factions, which is probably quite good. It means that the meta won't adapt around trying to beat us. But there is that question of will we get splash damage from some of those top armies, like, you know, your Death Guards, potentially your Knights, depending on how that shapes up, and all of those others. Will we get that splash damage from people teching into those particular armies? So very interesting, obviously, in terms of maybe Death Shrouds being similar-ish profiles to Deathwing Knights. Obviously not really, with the -1 damage having the huge sort of change on Deathwing Knights, but they are still 4-wound Terminators. So how close does that look? I'm not overly worried about it, in all honesty, but like those are the kinds of comparisons that we would make, and there might be something that is a little bit more relevant. So we've just seen a horde of new codexes and a new index come through. So we've had Death Guard, World Eaters, Thousand Suns, Emperor's Children wasn't that long ago. Chaos Knights is out this weekend. Then we've got the Imperial Knights Index, and then of course there is going to be the Space Wolf Codex coming into effect reasonably soon. Alongside that sort of glut of codices being published, we just had the new mission pack, and particularly Challenger cards are something that I think very much changed the dynamic of the game, especially if you're playing in WTC points. So something that's very important there to remember is that there is something that can catch you off guard. A lot of people have been talking like, how do I play with them? Or like, do I purposefully not do secondaries, etc., etc.? My gut feeling is no, but I haven't played enough to be able to really know, because I think the thing is, you are exchanging, like if you can score that secondary card, you're scoring something that you think you should be able to score, for something that is random. And ultimately you might not be able to do it, or it might be another action one. And I think in terms of that shape up of the pack and the meta, we are going to see fewer action monkey pieces, because there's fewer nasty, not nasty, but there's fewer action cards like Containment, where you would really feel the pain if you didn't get the 6 points on that. So very much worth thinking about those kinds of things. But I do think Challenger cards are going to have an impact. Ultimately, with the slate and with all of these codices, there has been a huge shake-up of the meta. We were seeing Ynnari as one of the top armies, and now it's very unlikely we'll see it. And then obviously that had its predators and its prey. So there's going to be a lot of interesting dynamics there. Death Guard had no changes when they are arguably still probably one of the best factions. It's only been light-ish changes for things like Space Marines. Guilliman went down 25 points, but did lose a big change in terms of his once per battle round rather than once per turn on his free strat. And obviously Calgar now doesn't generate that extra CP unless he's your Warlord. So a couple of really interesting changes. And Knights are going down a lot of points, and I'm concerned because like you see someone just go, well, I'm just going to play 6 big Knights. Yeah, very valid. That they're high OC, they're powerful, they are pretty damn good. I think there has been. We're going to see armies that we've never seen before. And in many ways, that's a really good thing. But equally, the point of this is to try and hope that you don't get caught napping and that you do get that support. So it's going to be a reasonably swift one, because I just don't think there's enough data out there for Dark Angels just yet in terms of what is good, etc. StatCheck did a fantastic video on Dark Angels winning a GT. That was Ines Wilson, who's exceptional player. Obviously has been one of the best in the world for a very long time now, and sort of demolished that local GT. Some really interesting thoughts on Wrath of the Rock, and I think that kind of, to me, I think probably is the final nail in the coffin for the Lion being competitive. Unfortunately, and I love playing with him, and he feels incredible when you play with him, but he's just so many points that the rest of the army starts feeling a little bit more clunky, and it's a real shame. Don't get me wrong, it's a real shame, but I think unfortunately that now is the case, which sucks. But maybe Games Workshop make him 285 again, and then we're all laughing. But no, I think the Lion, sadly, probably should start getting cut from competitive lists. But overall, I think it's a really exciting time to be a Dark Angel player. Go and check that video out from StatCheck. It's brilliant content, excellent list as well at the end. So, without further ado, let's jump into sort of what we need to be thinking about. Now, obviously, we know what we're doing, but there's always that kind of like some number of points for flex spots to deal with those problems that are more prevalent because of the way that the meta looks. And I think we are looking at a more vehicle heavy meta. Obviously Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights are going to be very prevalent. Death Guard, the sort of, again, actually, funnily enough, from another StatCheck player, Nathan Roberts, they had a 5-0 list. Obviously, this was pre-slate, but it didn't lose anything apart from the 6-inch rapid ingress. So it's still super powerful with that Death Guard list that is just like as many of these undercosted drones that you can have, and then triple Plague Burst Crawler, making everyone very sad with some Death Shroud and infiltrating Poxwalkers to sort of add on the pain. And I think that will be very good, just in terms of it being a very cheap stat check, but also the units that aren't as susceptible to those Plague Burst Crawlers and those horrible mortars are your T10 targets, because then even with contagion, they're not going down to being wounded on 4s. And I think because of that swinginess of the mortar, there is more scope. Obviously, without blast, that really does help as well. So I just think there's quite a lot of hostility towards those infantry lists. So it's an interesting one, and I think it's a very challenging one, but I do think we are looking at more vehicles, because I do think Ultramarines are still really good. Like Ultramarines Gladius is probably still the best Marine build up until the point that Space Wolves becomes legal. Maybe, possibly, we'll have to wait and see, because then Space Wolves Gladius might be the best, because it can leverage the cheapest T10 chassis, which obviously Predator Annihilator, and it can make that absolutely crazy with the Iron Priests. And if you want to learn more about Space Wolves, you can go and check out some of the other Black Crow content, where they've just done a Space Wolf tier list. And if you want to get pissed off at them, they've just done damage output, and they've all done it about how they kill the lion. So A, fuck you guys. B, love you guys. But that's actually really good content. It's really good to know your enemy as well, because I do expect to see a lot of Space Wolves running around. Which brings us really nicely onto the next point, and that's killing power. I think because we've seen a reduction in action secondaries, and we've seen a shift from the kind of the infantry spam lists, we will see more just raw killing power coming from undercosted vehicles or just very efficient vehicles, etc. I do think, looking at things like Thousand Sons, obviously they're playing lots of goats. I think Ed Watts has just done a brilliant video on his run at the Bristol GT with his horde of goats. I did recommend he called it Goatsy, but he wasn't up for it, sadly. But I think Thousand Sons are absolutely class, and I think they will still be doing those jail builds. So don't get me wrong, this is not a hard and fast rule, and your local meta will impact this. But let's just say you were going to, a national-sized tournament where it's not going to be your local meta. I think that there is going to be an increase of armies that are focused on killing first and scoring later, because equally it's more achievable to do that because you can also use those challenger cards to make sure you keep up. So, you know, I think that's definitely something to bear in mind, that a way you could use them is just to focus on tabling your opponent, and then in turns, you know, maybe 3, but more likely 4 and 5, just scoring maximum on primary, and lots more on secondaries, just to kind of put you over the edge because your opponent's already dead. So I think killing power will definitely see a rise in, and we do need to adjust to that, because that could cause us a lot of potential issues given the way that we work as that stat check damage soaking army. And then finally, my gut feeling is that we're going to be dragged into no man's land kicking and screaming. I think there's going to be a lot more in fighting in No Man's, really scrapping over objectives, looking at things like the new hidden supplies, or perhaps the new secondaries, so Tempting Target and Show of Might, I think it's called, the one where you need more units in No Man's Land. So I think there's definitely scope where you are going to need to be able to fight in No Man's Land more efficiently. What does that mean for your army? If you're playing on GW terrain, I think it means that you need some really good long-range supportive options, because otherwise you're going to struggle, because I think the lines in that are problematic. Similarly, in UKTC for the new mission pack that's just come out, really like the mission pack, by the way. I think there's going to be a considerable amount of long range there. So I'm looking at WTC, I'm looking at Wrath the Rock. At UKTC, I'm looking at Stormlance, because I like the ability to sort of get across that no man's land area, and not be sort of crossfired quickly. And I just don't think Wrath of the Rock is quite fast enough to be able to deliver that. So, but going on to WTC, I think that survivability and that grunt power will actually be what wins the day there, potentially. I'm pretty sure Innes was on WTC terrain for his GT win, and it makes sense. Like, I think a lot of WTC teams are going to be looking at Wrath of the Rock and going, well, that is a blunter extraordinaire. So, you know, as long as there's damage output armies on a similar level to your Blood Angels, to your Ultramarines from non-Space Marine factions, then I think there's definitely an argument for Wrath of the Rock. I think it's really, really solid, and in teams I think it's exceptional, because it plays into that no man's land brutality so well. I just think there's also a significant amount of impact on the terrain, because as survivable as Wrath of the Rock is, if 2,000 points gets to look at it and shoot it, it might be in serious trouble. Obviously, that is an extreme case. But when I was playing Sisters recently, with Morven Val with the full rerolls to wound and rerolls to hit, they really just had all the pieces just to still consistently kill me, and that proved really problematic, and I just didn't have the ability to pressure them that I needed to do on that particular terrain layout. I mean, I did still end up winning, but it was extremely problematic. So my gut says that I think Stormlance might still be the best version of Dark Angels on GW and UKTC terrain. I think Wrath of the Rock is probably the best on WTC, and in teams I think Wrath of the Rock is probably the best. So it's very interesting, and it's not an easy situation to be a Dark Angel player in, because I think it isn't, because if you are preparing for tournaments that use multiple terrain setups, and obviously in the UK we have predominantly UKTC, but we have quite a few tournaments that run WTC terrain, so Glasshammer, for example, or the aforementioned Ed Watts with his Firestorm Games tournaments down in Cardiff. They use WTC. And then obviously, there's a lot of WTC on TTS if you want to go against those top players who are preparing for the WTC event itself. I think you're going to need to be trying the different detachments and switching between the two, which is a challenge. And I'm not sure how I feel about that right now. But I think it's a good time to really push yourself as a Dark Angels player, where maybe you can go up that next level, look to become more of a jack of all trades, but also really master two very different styles of playing, because as much as they are Dark Angels, Wrath of the Rock plays extremely differently to Stormlance. It doesn't have that ability to pressure with movement speed and movement speed that you wouldn't expect. It pressures through primary control, which is very interesting, and that's why, which is actually very strange to say, I guess, that Wrath of the Rock is so good at WTC, because the expansion objectives are really quite exposed, but I think it's just that ability to outlast and outgrunt your opponent on WTC that lets it happen, and also the fact that you can probably get to them if they don't manage to kill all of you that are standing on the objective in WTC, while as on UKTC you can stand significantly further away and just plunk away with autocannons and things like that to really start causing trouble for the Dark Angels. I think it's there's a lot of different things we need to prep for, but I think a lot of the time, the back of my mind, I would always have that no man's land scrap that is going to be very down and dirty, I think. So in terms of that counterplay, we've touched on that already. And I think for Wrath of the Rock, the key is that survivability. The detachment is all based around being very hard to kill. And it sacrifices speed and aggression for that survivability. Is that good enough? Tough question. Really, really tough question to answer. But I think at least on the WTC ones, it probably is, which is exciting. Very, very exciting, I think. But in other ways, I'm not sure. But if there's one thing that we do very well, it is survivability, because of those Deathwing Knights. They can stand up to a lot of pressure. We can transition to this 2-up stat checklist very, very easily. We have access to ballistas. We have access to vindicators. I think they've fallen out of favour for a considerable amount of time, but it looks like Land Raiders might be more of an option now. Personally, I'm not going to run them, but I do think that they could be a little bit more relevant. But that survivability is certainly there, and survivability that can scrap really hard with other armor, I think is even better, which is why I love Deathwing Knights so much, and why I think that they are going to be an early front runner. But we'll touch on that shortly. So aggression, I think that ability to land the first meaningful blow, I think is going to be very key for Dark Angels, because once we have the opponent in our grips and once we have them playing the game that we would like to play, I think they really start struggling. And that's particularly prevalent from Stormlance, of where you can pressure them into situations and use that threat range to really scare them and keep up that pressure that they have to respond to what you're doing and not accelerate their game plan. Which kind of brings us on to primary denial. I think this is where Wrath of the Rock really excels. That ability to sit on an objective and just go, you're not getting rid of me. It's got something that can increase its OC. Obviously with the stratagem, there are reasons to play Ancients as well in that detachment. Obviously looking at sort of the Terminator Ancient for Deathwing Assault, possibly not on Deathwing Knights. I'm still not a huge fan of that. But there's definitely ways that you can up your OC. And then the best being Leering in aggression and being able to go, well, if you step on this objective, I do get to countercharge you, is obviously one of the most brutal things that I think you can do in any kind of list like that, because you're giving yourself movement in your opponent's turn. it's very different to a reactive move, but like think of it like Stormlance's reactive move in terms of impact to the game and in terms of frustrating your opponent's plan. So I think that primary denial is very, very key. And then finally, this is an interesting one. Prison and jail building. I was a little bit confused writing that because equally I feel like we want to be fighting in the middle. I don't think that's something that you can do very efficiently as a Wrath of the Rock player. I don't think you've got the speed. But I do think there's other, Stormlance with 15 Vanguard vets and then some infiltrating units just to keep our opponent blocked in. There's definitely more scope there to be able to just have units that survive clapbacks and are just annoying, get in the way, etc., etc., and just keep denying points. However, that needs to come with a pinch of salt because challenger cards do exist. Challenger cards are mean. They can have a direct impact on prison builds, like obviously being able to walk through your units, and also they will unlock some very powerful effects. I think one of the crazier ones I saw was someone deep striking, shooting, then moving after shooting and still being able to charge. So that was, I know it was only D6, but like still that was horrible. So I was very impressed with that. But yeah, so I think that's prison and jail definitely need a review. But I will caveat that it might not be quite where you want to be, because I do think we're being incentivized to get away from that and be a bit more interactive, which is fair and good, I think. And then finally, early front runners from units. I kind of need to make an apology because fuck me, was I off the mark with my units that I thought were doing well. Desolators are complete shit. I honestly felt like I was playing with 1.8k points when I played Desolators. They were garbage. I can't remember what else I said Inner Circle Companions were a winner. I'm pretty sure I'm going to cut all of them. So like there's so, and it trust me, that hurts my soul too. They're fucking beautiful. I want to play them so badly, but like usually for like 245 or 250 points, they ain't Deathwing Knights. So yeah, I think Inner Circle Companions may end up falling out of favor. So yeah, I was completely wrong in last week's video in many ways, because also I've dropped the Lions. So I think my early front runners, I'd put ICC's, I can't remember the other one, and Lion. Vanguard Vets I will stand by. I think Vanguard Vets are really awesome still. But yeah, Vanguard Vets and the Lion, ICC's and the Lion, both of which I've now dropped. And then in the losers, I put Deathwing Knights. Guess who's back on 15? I put Hellblasters in. I'll stand by that. I can't remember what else I put in. Something that I can't remember, which is therefore not. Infiltrators. I mean, I think the way Dark Angels play now, with the exception of maybe Linchpin, we are trying to force resources into the middle. So like infiltrators I don't think are as useful because we're going to be forcing them with sheer value in the middle. And it's like, if someone wants to drop in and kill my intercessors that have already sticky that objective, like I'm cool with that. So I do, yeah, I think I'll stand by that. And then I put on my ones I wanted to try. I think I put like Desolators, which are shit. Can't remember what else I put. Can't remember what else. Thinking is hard, guys. But yeah, like Desolators were very poor. So not ones that I would look at. However, Deathwing Knights, as I say, I'm back to 15. They're survivable, they're brutal, they're just the best option, and I'm pretty sure the Lion was punishing me for leaving 5 at home, so that's why now I'm back on the 15. It's an adjustment in using them from Stormlance, and I think that's probably why I was like, these don't feel quite as good, which I did say, because they didn't feel like quite as good as Stormlance Deathwing Knights, but I think maybe that was actually because of wider issues with the army surrounding sort of like having the lion and therefore not having enough pieces, and not really having a lot of other pieces to support it efficiently. Samael, I actually really love Samael because he gives another source of advance and charge in Wrath of the Rock, which I think is class. Super, super, super powerful. I'm not looking at him for Stormlance, but I'm definitely looking at him for Wrath of the Rock, for that second piece of advance and charge, particularly. But also he's another really reliable source of 3 damage. Because obviously we've got ancient weapons. I think I stand by Sternguard being really good, and like Captain Sternguard ancient weapons I quite like. But I think Samael feels really nice in those Wrath of the Rock lists, just at kind of increasing that speed. I'm only playing him with 3 Outriders. I want to keep that lean. I want to keep it cheap. But it's super survivable anyway because of those critical breakpoints of being 4 wounds, and also that -1 to wound on a T5 body is a lot more impactful. And then finally, Storm Speeders in general, I'm actually super excited about. So the Thunderstrike I've put in because of the stat check lists, but like we saw Josh Roberts. I mean, again, it's Josh Roberts. The man is, fucking Warhammer God. So, obviously there is a huge amount of skill involved in that. But he used 3 Storm Speeder Hammer Strikes at the Bristol GT in Stormlance, which is kind of crazy. Kind of awesome, like really awesome. I read that list and I was like, yeah, that's not what was intended for a White Scars detachment, but that's fucking cool. So that was really exciting. And I think Storm Speeders might have a place in some Dark Angels lists. I'm not going to say much about that because I think there's some tech that I'm thinking of that's quite spicy. But yeah, keep your eye on Storm Speeders. I don't have stock in Storm Speeders, by the way. I'm not just trying to get you to buy them, as much as I love that. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff in Storm Speeders. Very interesting stuff there. So I will be coming back to that later. And that is partly because of the way the meta has changed. And I think it's only going to become more impactful when Knights come in properly. So what does that mean for us? I think we're in a good spot. I think it's a good time to be a Dark Angels player. I think we have to murder our darlings. And obviously by murdering our darlings, I mean dropping the lion, dropping Inner Circle companions. Trying to think what other nasty Dark Angel-y bits that we'd have to drop. But those are sort of the 2 majors that I'm thinking that we need to drop. Because I think just like for 6 ICCs at a Judicia, it is 250 points. And then you compare that to a Deathwing Knight, and it just doesn't add up to me, in all honesty. So that's not something I'm looking at now. But I think once we do that, I think we're going to start seeing something really nice going with Dark Angels. I don't think we're going to be S tier. I think we're going to be bottom of A tier if we play it right and if we find that list. So I'm quite excited. I really think there's a lot of play. I've got my first super major coming up next week. I've then got Leeds the week after. So it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. It's exciting, and I'm looking forward to this as a Dark Angels player. So just as importantly, thank you very much for watching. We've been sponsored by Glasshammer Gaming, where you can get your lovely models using code BlackCrow for 5% off. You can get your lovely terrain from Terrain Forge, and you can get 5% off with BCG5. And then we also are supported by Trident Futureworks, who do some lovely bespoke cases. If you see me at tournaments, you'll see mine. I can fit all of my armies in there, which is really handy. So that's been quite good. And then you can go and join our Discord. You can join my Discord, which is Angelus Mortis Discord. And you can kind of be a bit more part of the community if you so wish. We have other series as well that you can go and enjoy: Space Wolves, World Eaters, Emperor's Children, etc., etc. But ultimately, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about those early frontrunner units are. Let me know if you think I'm completely off the mark with the Lion, and make sure you give reasons and everything like that, because my gut says no Lion. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed, and remember, stay loyal, fuckers, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys. Bye.